Let's give a warm Central Coast welcome to Sam MacPherson. Sam.
Is there room for Kaizen in leadership? And everybody said, amen. Absolutely. If you're gonna do what we are passionate about, one of the things we got to think about is, how can I be a better leader every day? One of the things I'm absolutely convinced with, just like with TPS, you have to choose to engage the Toyota production system or lean every day. There's no autopilot to that process. You have to walk in the door every day saying, this is how I'm going to run my operation today. This is how I'm going to run my enterprise today. Well, guess what? That's the absolute same question or way of thinking you have to think about when it comes to lean leadership. You have to choose to be a lean leader every day. Okay, because in a way it's kind of a different form of leadership. I always kind of like when I talk to some of my executives and some of my leadership folks, I said, what got you to this point? What got you here as a leader won't get you to the other side of a lean transformation. Because a lean transformation is a completely different dynamic. And honestly, one of the gaps that I see is we don't prepare leaders to truly lead a transformation. We don't get them ready for what they're up against. So a little bit of what we're going to talk about today is how can we do a better job of helping leaders or developing and preparing leaders to lead a transformation. What are you going to be up against? And we probably won't have nearly enough time to explore all those concepts, but I just want to tickle your brain a little bit when it comes to that. I also want to talk about how can we do a better job of developing our leadership team. How can we do a better job of developing our leadership pipeline? How can we build highly engaged, globally deployable leaders? Because we need them. We need them for the future. We need them for U.S. and global competitiveness. So we're going to talk about leadership today. Is that okay with you? All right. So one of the things that Eric normally I'm kind of known for is when I get my group of leaders together, when I work with a lean transformation client, I kind of bring in a great group of leaders that are the organizational leaders, starting with the senior site leader, his or her key staff leaders, and then we look at what leaders do we want to develop in the organization. So we handpick some of our initial lean leaders, and we bring them in. So I have a cross-functional depth and breadth of leaders and potential leaders, supervisors and team leaders, and sometimes operators that we're saying this person is going to be a team leader for us. And we do it in a couple of groups, as we work together. So I use the lean transformation itself as a platform for developing leaders. So we work very hard in doing that. So on the first day of the Lean Leadership Academy, they learned a little ritual because cultures need rituals and they need artifacts. So my artifact just happens to be a red Nerf ball, about this big, and it's a very diabolical red ball because every time you get it, I'm going to ask you a question about something you learned yesterday or today or during the week. And it's pretty ruthless about trying to pull your brain out and see what you remember from the day or two before. But to get them ready, get them thinking at a whole different level of speed, we do something that's called Leaders Want the Ball. And this is something I think Eric really brought me up here for, is to get you awake this morning. So if you would be kind enough to join me in the lineage of so many lean leadership students over the years since like 1995, would you please stand up carefully, safety first. All right, shake it off a little bit. All right, take a deep breath. Let it out. Take a deep breath. Let it out. Take a deep breath. Hold it. Hold it. Wait till you see the little stars. Okay, let it out. All right, so what I will normally have is my little red ball. I should have brought it with me this morning, but we'll have a we'll have the ninja red ball. It's in hiding. It just blends into the background. So normally I'll reach up in the air and I'll hold that red ball and I'll say, how many of you today have seen the movie The Replacements with Keanu Reeves and Gene Hackman? Okay, so every time that Keanu Reeves comes up to Gene Hackman, what would Gene Hackman say to Keanu Reeves? Winners want the ball. There you go. You win. You're the first person that actually answered that. And the many times that I asked that. So I said, we're going to put a different spin on that. We're going to say, leaders want the ball. So now there's a very specific way to do this. I'm going to reach up in the air just like I'm holding my red ball, and I'm going to look at you. I'm going to say, leaders want the ball. Who wants the ball? And then I want you to kind of get into a proper receive the ball attitude. I want you to step forward slightly with your right foot and put your hands out like this. And then I want you to, with your most dynamic shop floor gimbal voice, I want you to say, give me the ball. Okay? And one of the reasons why I do this is I want these guys to build a shop floor voice so that you can speak like this and sound like you're on the radio. And so we do this drill every day. It kind of gets their blood flowing. So you want to try this out? All right, so we're going to practice a couple of times. I'm going to count you down. I'm going to reach up and I'm going to say, leaders want the ball. Who wants the ball? 1, 2, 3, and then you're going to fire back at me and blow me up against this wall here, okay? Are you ready? All right, are you ready? Yes. I can't hear you. Are you ready? Yes. All right, here we go. Leaders want the ball. Who wants the ball? 1, 2, 3. Oh, come on. Okay, they must have not put Starbucks in the coffee this morning. Let's quality control check that. I had 17 people that do better than that. The Kaizen mind in me says you could have started at a higher level. So, believe that's what I tell them. Look, you could have started here. Why don't we just start here? We'll move up from there. Okay. Can you do better? Yes. Can we Kaizen that? Yes. Build your Kaizen mind. Okay, let's do it again. All right. Take a deep breath. Let it out. All right. Leaders want the ball. Who wants the ball? 1, 2, 3. Give me the ball! It's the California thing, isn't it? You got to get a little rebel yell in you, you know? All right, let's do it this time, and let's wake up the Performing Arts Center staff, okay? All right, they're still asleep from all the stuff, practice they were doing last night. Okay, no, more importantly, let's wake up Dr. Olson and his staff, because I know what they were doing last night. You know, about 2 hours of sleep. Okay, last time, look, I really want you to give me everything you got. Can you do it? Yes. All right. All right. So, are you ready? Now, this time I'm not going to count you down. Okay, it's probably throwing you off a little bit. Okay. All right, so this time I'm just going to ask you, leaders want the ball, who wants the ball? And you're just going to just give it to me. 1, 2, 3. Leaders want the ball. Who wants the ball? Give me the ball. All right. Were you always capable of doing that? Yes. Why didn't you? You just want me to stand up here and do this all day? That's really the only reason why I came here. Is to Eric wanted me to wake all you guys up this morning. Okay, so the lesson in that, with your Kaizen mind, is that you always were capable of starting at that point. So always do. Please be seated. Yes, sir. Okay, I thought you just wanted me to do an individual red ball drill for them. Okay. All right, so that's the way we wake up every morning, and sometimes we have to do that 2 or 3 times a day. Now, the part that comes after that is that red ball comes at you, and then you've got to you're going to be asked a question, and you have to answer that question comprehensively. That means all answers are highly specific as to content, sequence, timing, and outcome. It's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Okay, but if I start you off first thing in the day, my leaders know that I'm going to inspect what I expect. What do you think the learning is? Moves from a passive to a very active learning engagement, doesn't it? A little trick for you, try it out. Drive it around the corner. kick the tires a little bit, see how it works for you. Okay, let's talk about leadership this morning. So some of the things that we're going to talk about this morning, well, you got the introduction. I think whether you know it or not, you know who I am now. We'll talk about the current state of lean and lean leadership. We're also going to talk about some of the prerequisites, some of the things that are prerequisites for a successful lean transformation. I know that some of you are saying, how do I get my senior leadership on board? And so what we like to call our three-ring circus, the things that we have discovered that are prerequisites to a successful lean transformation that's going to help you is part of what's going to get your senior leadership engaged. The reasons why leading a lean transformation often fails. This one's probably my more heady, deep dive thing that will make you go, And then we're going to talk about the current state of lean leadership development. And then I'm going to give you some ideas. And of course, you'll have access to a copy of the presentation. Just some things to try out. Okay, so they're going to be radically different than anything that you've ever thought about as far as leadership development. But they're very proven ways to develop leaders and develop your leadership pipeline. So again, one of these things is just take it, try a couple of them out, and if you kind of feel good about those two, go to the next one. So I got about 7 of them in here that might be interesting for you. And then I'll follow up with the summary of the fundamentals. There will be a pop quiz at the end of this. Please take notes. Don't you miss the days when you had to buoy a dog in his flip chart? There we go. All right, so why should the lean community look at the current state of leadership development and leadership and transformational leadership? Well, there's a big reason. You heard my argument that we do not do a good job of preparing people to lead a lean transformation. And so the reasons why lean transformation fail is essentially you are choosing to implement this is a university group, so I can use my big words for today. I studied them last night. You're choosing to implement a management system that is dialectic, that's so completely different from your existing management system, they cannot coexist. Not if you're going to implement the systems. Tools can, coexist with almost anything. But if you're going to implement, from my perspective, in my background in Toyota, you have to understand that TPS is a system, and it's part of a larger system called Toyota Management System. It is very comprehensive. It is very integrated. And if you choose to have that be your management system in the future, you must embrace the fact that your old system and your new system cannot coexist. Sort of what we kind of talked about yesterday is that you need to think about the strength of a few things. So how do we talk to CEOs? How do we talk to CFOs about where they're at and why they should transform to lean? Well, I'm the grandson of a Church of God preacher, so I occasionally preach a little bit. So you'll know a tree by its fruit. So if you think about the fruit of the tree, it's probably EBITDA, their current cost of goods sold, all their financial performance. But you could also look in there, you could have the current culture, their turnover rate. You can look at the fruit of the current management system, and you will know what you have. And so when I talk to leaders about, are you happy with that? Is that the kind of fruit that you were looking for to come out of your current management system? So the current management system kind of has producing a specific level of fruit. What we need to do as leaders is do a better job of discussing what fruit could come from this tree. So the other thing that you as a lean leader need to understand, like a big oak tree, we underestimate the strength of the current leader mindsets. the strength of the current management system, the strength of the culture that has been created by the two of those, the strength of the management routines. And to further, with the roots of that tree, we underestimate the depth in which our management infrastructures and our IT platforms these days have actually inculcated that behavior in us. Okay, so you find what started out as managers managing a certain way and then reinforcing that with IT platforms, management platforms, financial platforms, reporting platforms, and before you know it, they're trapped in their own cage. Amen? Amen. Yeah, I knew people in California could say amen. And so, did anybody tell you that when you were going to be a lean transformation leader, you were going to have to go up against that 800-pound gorilla in the room? Not an easy fight, is it? Okay, so we need to do a better job of helping leaders have the skills and competencies and the confidence necessary to take that big youngin' down. It can be done, but you have to train them to be a guerrilla wrestler. Okay, remember the two systems can't coexist. They cannot coexist. So you're going to have to learn how to do judo on this gorilla. It can be done. So what I'm trying to do in my life is help leaders be able to understand, how do we overcome that? Well, this is a university, and we know Newton's first law of physics. An object or a tree at rest remains at rest, right? That management system's not going to move by itself. It's got to be acted upon by an outside force with equal and opposite force, right? Okay, so you're going to have to take a wrecking ball to this if you want it to move. It's going to take strong leadership. It's going to take strong methods. It's going to take strong routines to overcome that old system. And further, one of the things that we don't do that often is we don't physically change the environment, because the old system has its own physical environment. When we do lean tools, they don't really change the environment, do they? They're out there, but is it easy to just kind of, if you're doing Kanban today, if you decide tomorrow, the next guy decides you're not going to do Kanban anymore, how long does it take to take Kanban off the floor? Seconds. Okay, so you go to Toyota, what do you see? You see and-on systems. You see material movement systems. If you're lucky, you see something called an Obeya. You see team FMDS rooms. Floor management and development system area, team rooms. So the environment is physically different. It's kind of hard not to manage the Toyota way, because you everywhere you look, it's right at you. And so part of what we have to do is we have to take down this old system, and we have to replace it with something that physically changes the environment to support the way we want to lead and manage. And that makes it a little harder to undo. More importantly, we can shape the environment to support how we want to lead the organization. It's just something to think about there for a minute. But does it make sense? Sometimes with things like leader standard work. Okay, we do leader standard work, but if you don't have something physically to make you go do leader standard work and an environment that supports how you're going to do leader standard work, then if the next guy comes along, what happens to leader standard work if you don't like it? You have to make it hard to go away. Okay, you have to make the environment be the way you want to lead and manage the company or the organization. So we've got to take this guy down. Don't underestimate the strength of these items. And you're going to have to come up with a very specific plan. The last one's probably the hardest one, the strength of the reinforcing infrastructure. Okay? If you have an ERP system of some sort or another, or a regulatory systems that force you and cage you into a certain way of managing your business, break free. Break free. So, yes, sir? Switch. Okay. Talk about ninja. All right, so this is what you're up against, and I know Ken's here this morning, but my partner Art Smalley and I dug into some of the more recent Shingo Institute information to say, okay, how did most organizations do that were pursuing lean? And we were trying to understand, okay, what were the success factors of the organizations that were able to have a long-term success and do pretty well at this, and what were the differences with the ones that were doing really well, and that within 3 to 4 or 5 years, they went back to the old way of doing things, or sometimes worse. Okay, so one of the things that we looked at is that not only are you up against that big gorilla, but that big gorilla has basically had an effect probably on roughly 85 to 95% of the organizations that tried to do this. Okay, so that's what you're up against, but I know you're willing to drive through because you said leaders want the ball this morning. So what's the difference between the 85 and 95%, 85 and the 15%, the 15% that seem to kind of get it, and then continue to move on in the right direction? Well, one of the things that we noticed was that most of the ones on this side of the 85% side of the equation, sometimes they had charismatic leaders. Sometimes they had folks that were really interested in the tools. They didn't necessarily tie it to performance. They clearly didn't use it to develop their leadership pipeline. So they weren't using the opportunity to do a transformation and use that transformation to build their leadership team in a depth in the organization, so that 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, future plant managers, future senior leaders would come out of that transformation and make disciples of all men. And that's kind of where we're missing the boat. They kind of leave it with a Kaizen office with 3 or 4 people running around doing all kinds of lean stuff instead of being a force multiplier. And so we never miss an opportunity to take a lean transformation and build leaders. So if you've been around Toyota long enough or lean long enough, you've probably heard build people before things. And I'm going to challenge you a little bit more. I'm going to say build leaders that are capable of building people before building things. And that actually came out of a conversation with Pete Gritton and Glenn Umminger and myself and Erlanger last week. We're convinced we build people, but we've got a skills gap. So how's that working for us? And the half-life of a skill right now is 2.5 years. That means whatever skill you have right now, in 2.5 years, it's going to be irrelevant. So we need to build leaders capable of Kaizen every day and improving work every day, so that's not even a factor, because if you're improving work every day, what are you doing? You're maintaining, you're closing the skills gap. We're not waiting 2.5 years to change the job. We change the job every day, or at least once or twice a week. So that's why it's important for us to build lean leaders, strong lean leaders. So the 3 things that we discovered that helped the 15%, and I think probably that top 5%, was that the leaders and this is critical for you to get that senior leadership engagement, there had to be at least 3 things. Number 1, you had to have a strong business case for change. Okay, there has to be a strong financial business case for someone to want to change the old management system, the devil they know, to a new management system, which is the devil they don't know, or they think they know. Right? Make sense? It's kind of like a 12-step process. You gotta be willing to change. Hi, I'm Sam. I'm a leanaholic. Hi, Sam. Everybody? Hi, Sam. Okay. I've been on my lean journey for the last 10 years, and all I've gotten is 5S in place. I spent all my time auditing it. My audit's 15 pages thick and still get a score over 3. Okay. All right. The next thing is to understand that what we call lean, based on the Toyota production system and the Toyota management system, holistically is, the key word being, a system, not a collection of tools. So we have to embrace, if we're going to do this, and Mr. Ono warned us about this, if you're going to do TPS, you need to do it all the way. Or you'll be worse off than you were before you started the process. Because when you look at that house of TPS, as Mr. Cho said, every element of the house supports the other elements of the house to help it stand. And to kind of go to what Jamie Flinchbaugh mentioned in his article in Industry Week a couple of weeks ago, it's a fragile system. It's designed to be a little bit fragile. If you take out Jidoka, then the rest of the house falls. If you take out just in time and only do Jidoka, the rest of the house falls. And that's not a safe place to live in, is it? Safety first, right? Okay. So you have to embrace that it's a management system. That's not something, everybody's seen the house TPS, right? Okay, you probably know about 3 or 4 elements in each of the pillars, right? Well, from my perspective, when I was learning TPS, I became aware that there are over 360 systems, subsystems, processes and sub-processes, methods and techniques that support what we call the house TPS. I actually have a map this big called the Kaizen map for TSSC that I train to. And 360 different subcomponents, most of it things you've never heard of. Okay? But all of that works together to make the house of TPS work. And so we need to embrace that the system is that well thought out, that comprehensive. And so you build, now I always like the physics of building a house. You know, so when we learned the image of the house, we say, well, we're going to do our lean transformation and we're going to do it like we're going to build a house. And so what's the first thing that you do when you build a house? What's that? Why everybody says that. No, you go see an architect. You got to wonder what would we call the blueprint? That's your ocean plan, right? Okay. Once you know what the house is going to look like and what the plan is for the house, then you lay the foundation. If you take it from the point of view of my buddy Art Smalley, that's stability and reliability in the 4 M's. Okay, so we got to get basic stability in place. In Toyota, they spent the first 20 to 30 years doing nothing but working on basic stability before they started doing things fancy like just-in-time again. Since the whole just-in-time system was disabled during World War II. Okay, so and then lastly, you've embraced lean as a management system. Now, do you think if there's a big business case, senior leaders are going to be involved? If you can prove that there is a solid, no kidding, going to make my customers happy, going to deal with I always like to say, how do I determine my business case? I always say, okay, I want you to bring your top 5 customers in here, and I want you to ask them, what do I have to do to grow my business with you? One thing, price reduction can't be on the table. Because price reduction is the value determinant of last resort. People ask for a price reduction when they can't get anything else, right? But we all experience that there are things that are important to us we will not accept risk in. And we're willing to pay a little bit more for it. How many people have an iPhone? See, we're willing to pay a lot for something that 2 cans and a string used to do for us. So identifying that. So if I had your top 5 customers in here that controlled your capacity and contributed to your profitability and said, price can't be on the table, what can I do to grow with you? What do you think they would tell you? Reduce lead time, right? You know, get the stuff to me, better quality, right? Hey, after you sell me this stuff, be there for me after the sale, right? Service, right? So by finding out what's necessary and putting a price tag to that, now you're going to get people engaged because it's your top 5 customers, not your 350th customer. You know, these guys control your capacity, they control your resources, they control your profitability, they control your future. Okay? And so if you ask them, what do I need to grow with you? They're going to tell you what they really need. The others benefit from it. And if it's the top 5 customers, what's senior leadership going to do? Are they going to risk you running down the road, putting Kanban in and ruining that relationship and put them out of business? Absolutely not. So all of a sudden you got leadership engagement, right? There's actually a little exercise. What I do is I do a values matrix. And I'll have them actually look up the top 5, top 10 customers by demand, top 10 customers by contribution to profitability. More importantly, the demand piece is who owns your capacity. Okay, and then I have them put the 8 value determinants up here and do a number matrix with 1 being the most important to that particular customer and 5 being the least important to that customer. And as they go through the matrix, they'll find across their top 5, top 10 customers what's most important to the critical customers in the organization. And then the next question, how do you measure what's important to your customers? You'd be surprised how many times lead time was the number 1 and they did not measure lead time or delivery or quality. So how can you satisfy your customers? You never know where you're at. So the little things like that gets leadership engaged. Remember, we need to take that tree down. Lastly, never let a good transformation go to waste. If you've got a business case, if you embrace the lean as a system, then use that transformation to build your leaders. So a lot of times I'll have our clients actually look at the forensics. I make them pull out the credits, the complaints, the return authorizations, Pareto out what the customer is telling you that they weren't happy about. If it was delivery, if it was quality. And then I will look at, let's say quality's number 1 on the customer unhappiness list by the forensics and say, okay, who's in charge of quality? Well, the quality manager is. Well, he's got to be in the first group of leaders. We're going to solve a real quality problem and we're going to develop that quality manager into a quality leader. And a lean leader is part of the process. Where's your finance person? Where's your human resources person? Oh, by the way, 3 people that are, when I work with you, the 3 people that are absolutely not excused from a lean transformation is the senior site leader, the financial leader, and the human resource leader. And then everybody else's first participation is based on the business case. And then we look and say, where do we want to pilot it? Who are the leaders, the natural leaders in that area that we want to develop as leaders? Even if they're a little grumpy. Because if we can get those guys on board, they're natural floor leaders, right? I had the privilege of having lunch with Will James, who's the president of Toyota Motor Manufacturing Kentucky, the other day. We were talking about leadership and talking about how Toyota selects their leaders. And the one thing he said right off the bat, of course I knew this, but I had a group with me, is that we look for people who not necessarily technically proficient. We look for people who are natural floor leaders, who care about their people. People look to them and trust them in their thinking. We pick leaders that already demonstrate leadership on the floor with the people they work with. And then we can build the technical capability into them. And then what they will do is they'll have a board, and then someone will say, hey, we got a group leader's position coming up. Who have we got that's ready to be a group leader? And they will nominate someone to be a group leader or a supervisor. And so you don't get selected then, they start looking at you. So you'll go to that board meeting and nominate someone for that supervisor's position, and for the next 6 months to possibly a year, they will be looking closely at you to see how you lead. And then, of course, you have to be nominated by your team as well. So the team has to nominate you as well as your supervisor nominating you. Kind of a different process, isn't it? Do we take the time to really find out if someone's ready to be a leader? So, again, we got to develop that leadership pipeline. Never miss an opportunity in a lean transformation to use that to build a leader. Make sense? Don't leave it to a few folks in the Kaizen office. or don't try to go it alone as a senior leader or as a passionate lean leader yourself. Build a team. Build leaders before building people. Build people that can build things. Make sense? Everybody still with me? It's deep thinking stuff. It's not serious. Okay, so build your highly engaged leaders as part of this process. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. Again, I'm really missing my flip chart. Have we got any tinfoil in the back I can wrap it around my head? There it was. That's the trick. Okay, so we're going to talk about leadership. Wait a minute. So one of the questions, and somebody actually, I saw this in a LinkedIn discussion. There's no such thing as lean leadership. It's just leadership. Well, that would be like saying there's no such thing as military leadership. It's just leadership. It's different, right? Military leadership's different than other leadership, right? And can you be a leader and do bad things? And get other people to do bad things, right? Leadership is just the art and science of influence, right? And so, yes, lean leadership is a real thing. That's going to be in your pop quiz later. So in some conversations that I had over the last couple of years, I really kind of refined this and said, yes, it's not lean leadership is not just a real thing, it is a discipline. And if it's a discipline, that means we can train people to that discipline. We can develop people to that discipline. What makes it a discipline? Well, first and foremost, we have our own belief system. Okay, we believe, even without seeing, that lean is the way to go, right? We believe in it. These guys over here, the old group, they don't believe in it. Weak belief system that TPS as a management system will work better than their old system. We have our own values, and we hold ourselves to those values. At a minimum, we have the values of the Toyota way. Continuous improvement, respect for others. Under respect for others, we have respect and respect the individual, respect our stakeholders, and we have teamwork. Okay, on the other side, we have challenge. We have Kaizen, and then we have something really strange called Genchi Genbutsu. Or for my guys, that's get your boots on. Which means go and see with your own eyes, understand, go and understand. Go and see the actual conditions in the actual place, in the actual environment, understand completely, right? Who puts that in your corporate philosophy? That's kind of odd, but it must mean something. But at a minimum, we embrace that, right? We embrace that. How many people practice go and see? Raise your hand. Yeah, so we've embraced that. So the Toyota way as a minimum is the foundation of some of our values. We have our own fundamental beliefs, values, thinking structures. When we think thinking structures, what are our thinking structures? PDCA, scientific thinking, A3 thinking, Pareto thinking. What we like to say is we think analytic, quantifiable, and detailed. We analyze, prioritize, and decide. Okay? We follow a scientific structure in our minds. And so we have our own thinking structures, our own expected behaviors. Do we expect lean leaders to behave differently than other leaders? Absolutely. And we have our own keystone routines, sometimes known as leader standard work or a bunch of other standard work. Okay? So we have these routines that reinforce our principles, our values, our thinking structures. Then that means we have a discipline. But it also means that we have to develop the skills and abilities in those disciplines. So we need to, as lean leaders, we need to develop the platforms for that. Lord knows we don't have enough time to talk about how we would do that. But I want to challenge your mind to think about how do I develop thinking structures. Toyota business practice, 8-step problem solving process, A3 management, A3 thinking. Those things reinforce that, making sure for every plan there's a do, for every do there's a check, and for every check there's an act and adjust. So we have this is a discipline. The other thing I'm going to make you aware of is that we currently have, and this is as of about 2012, I watched the numbers. It's still bouncing up a little bit from that, but I just want this to kind of shock you, that's why it's in red, is that we have a 31% gap between the availability of highly engaged, globally deployable lean leaders and the need for leaders. Now, we churn out MBAs left and right, okay? But is every MBA, and I know we got a few of them in here, you know, a few PhDs, you know. But does that make you a leader? Or that just help you to be a really smart person, okay? So there's the potential there, right? So we must, Deloitte said in their Talent Edge 2020 that it is affecting U.S. competitiveness because we don't have as many leaders as we need. And we need to change that. And so when they interviewed the executives around what was the top 5, I'm a top 5 guy, what are the top 5 most pressing concerns regarding this for you? They said, number 1, developing leadership and a succession plan. So again, building their bench strength. We worry about this. Number 2, keeping their leadership team intact. You know, just keeping my team together. You know, they're going to go off and be pulled off into other things. Maybe they don't feel like they're being developed as a leader, right? Number 3, predicting globally deployable leadership needs and shortages. Number 4, focusing on building their leadership pipeline, which is kind of my passionate, you know, run around the village with my head on fire screaming thing. You know, build your leadership pipeline. Use your transformation to do it. And then lastly, developing and acquiring highly qualified supervisors. And this actually came out of an Accenture study. That the executive said, 50% of the executives said, we need to acquire highly qualified supervisors because of our environment and our business demands. So we have got to find some ways to really get our leadership group back on board. And it's kind of sad when you spend 10 years in your position before you get your first supervisor training. How many people have been in their position for that long before you actually had any formal leadership training? How many of you have been in your position for 30 years and never had any formal leadership training? Okay, so what's our response to that? Well, more often than not, our folks lead to go get advanced degrees so they could go to get a job so they can learn to lead. Okay. Number 2, we kill them by death by PowerPoint. Number 3, we still treat them like they're in school. Teacher, I brought you an apple. Okay. Or we get them in trouble because we give them belts and then somebody says, oh, you're a black belt. Come here, buddy. More often than not, what happens is we leave people out there to kind of discover and figure out how to be a leader on their own. You know what? It's a good thing they actually figure it out sometimes. So the bottom line is, as our executive said, we struggle with building leaders. We know it's important. We don't know how to do it. Okay? Yeah, that's a gap. And if we had that figured out, there wouldn't be a 31% gap in the availability of leaders and the need for leaders. So I'm going to hit a couple of things real quick that in the little bit of time I got left, just to tickle your brain a little bit and see if you could think about some things that you could try out on your own that will help us do a better job of developing leaders. And keep in mind what Vince Lombardi said, contrary to the opinion of people, leaders are not born, they're made, and they're made by effort and hard work, and that is absolutely true. Now, some people come into the game with a little bit of talent as well, but it still takes hard work. Being a mentor to a leader and building leaders every day is hard work. It's hard work on you, it's hard work on the person being developed too. So I want to also kind of make the point that from a Toyota perspective, Toyota looks at, they don't really look at it from a management standpoint. The kanji that you see up there often means cho. Sometimes when it's long, it's oso. And so from Toyota's perspective, it's kojo cho, plant leader. okay? Manufacturing leader versus plant manager, okay? Kojocho, Hancho. So if you look at, instead of group supervisor, it's group leader, team leader, department leader, plant leader. So from Toyota's perspective, especially from the Kamigo and Japan Toyota perspective, they do not separate. They don't see it as management. Management's part of leadership. They think of it as leadership first. Okay, they lead. That's why they don't call their supervisors. They call them group leaders. And so to reinforce their role in leading. Just remember, as leaders, you have to shape. Remember, leadership is a process of shaping and influencing. So you have to make sure that not only do you shape inside your team, this little team, you also have to shape outside of your team, inside of the organization, and outside of your organization in the community and your relationships with others. My point is that you never stop being a lean leader. When you as a lean leader are leading, if you're talking to the mayor, you do that from the point of view of a lean leader. When you're talking when you're helping the local hospital adopt TPS, you do it as a lean leader. So whether you're inside of your team and your organization, you're outside of the team and the organization, you never stop being a lean leader, because remember, your charge is that you have to shape and influence as a lean leader. You have to shape the purpose of your organization. You have to shape the timeline of your organization, especially in your transformation. You have to shape the structure. Remember I said, change the physical structure of your organization so that it reflects how you lead and manage from a lean perspective. So challenge yourself a little bit. Maybe start with something like a small room, a little war room, and use that as your hub. That's different, isn't it? You know, the Obeya concept, right? Shape thinking patterns through mentoring and coaching. Shape procedures and standards. Shape behaviors you expect in the organization. Shape your tools. Shape the system. Shape the environment. If you do that, shape the results. If you do that, you're going to shape the culture. Notice that in my three-ring circus, I didn't have culture up there. Why? Because if you do all of that, culture's the effect. It's what you produce. And that's what I want you to do. So I knew that there was going to be a lot of information I wanted to cover with you. You got to have access to this presentation. I filled it up with all kinds of goodies to think about. Procedures, processes, techniques to try out. Then they're pretty detailed in their explanation, so when you get a copy of this presentation, you'll have about 7 little techniques to use, and I can talk to you. I'll be here all day, you know, so tip your waitresses. And I'd like for you to look at those different techniques and then talk to me about it, or call me up, you know, send me an email, and we'll talk about it. But just try something. Try something to develop leaders and lead a different way. So, seems like we're out of time now, so what questions do you have? What questions can I answer for you? Going once?
Here we go. I got a microphone.
Ooh, question.
Okay, so you talked about, you know, as far as teaching people to be lean leaders, not just death by PowerPoint. So do you do more sort of activity-based, you know, like a lot of lean, you know, coaching in general deals with, okay, let's, you know, go do like a little building block with Legos or whatever. You know, is it more that type of training? Yeah, probably from a Lean Leadership Academy. And in some of my slides, I show you some techniques for that. So one of the things that I do when we're together is probably one of the biggest way we do this is I introduce them to something that I don't have, but I can share it with you. It's called Lean Leadership Procedures. And the Lean Leadership Procedures is a process of leadership. It's the science of leadership that also allows and encompasses the processes of the PDCA as well.
And so following the lean leadership procedure is about a 10-step process that ensures that you actually lead properly and have deep consideration as you get ready to lead. The other thing we do is when, instead of me standing up here in front of you with PowerPoint, unfortunately, even my first 2 days of Lean Leadership Academy is pretty heavily on that. And as quickly as possible, I put myself in a position where Art and I can be observers and coaches and let them do the instruction. So instead of us teaching a class on 5S, the lean leaders have to plan, develop, and using flip charts and very creative methodologies, we have them teach the 5S and demonstrate it, and it's comprehensive. The other thing we do is that every time you make a presentation, then you'll have 2 people observing that presentation looking for recommendations for improvement, and then there'll be the next 2 that are going to be in line for the presentation. They have to look at recommendations for emulation that others should emulate. So there's a constant chain of depth of knowledge development that goes with that. And then the practical side of that is that when they teach most of the applications that have a do piece to it, go do something like implement 5S, then they have to have shop floor training, actual shop floor training in a pilot area where they're going to have a place where we're going to do S1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll have another place over here that's already got 1, 2, 3 and done, and we got to do 4 and 5 there, so that it's very interactive. So what happens as a result of that the leaders that present, and I have them present as a buddy team or as a team, they get the depth of the knowledge, they get the experience, you get the pilot out of it, and they get this constant feedback loop of, if you had to do that all over again, here's how we would recommend that you do it. So they're getting feedback from the other leaders as part of the process. The other big thing is, to do that, you have to do the leadership planning stuff. And so they get to exercise using the lean leadership procedures just to do something as simple as teach 5S. So a lot of times we don't teach a lot of that stuff. We teach the management system, the major stuff that's difficult for you to find popular information. But, we have them teach almost everything else in lean. We want to coach what they understand, and we can't see what they understand till they share that with us. Yeah, absolute immersion. We educate you and then we dump you into the deep end of the pool. Immersion's absolutely the right way to call that. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Okay. So you talked about the leadership system that they already have in place. And how do you combat the need for immediate gratification and results? Because lean takes time to establish and definitely to sustain. So how does it not just become another flavor of the week? And how do you get leadership to buy in that you may not be seeing results right away, but it's going to accumulate over time? Well, it goes back to what's your business case? What's your business case to saying you want to do this? And so when we work with the senior leadership team, we have kind of a tricky question. We say, what's your $5 million problem? It's an old McKinsey trick of what's your $5 billion problem. When you can find that significant, we're going to use the lean transformation to solve a real business problem for you. Number one, it gets the senior leadership directly engaged because they don't want to risk not accomplishing that. We actually have them make that part of their annual operating plan, part of their expected outcome from the budget. And then that gets them engaged. Also, when you're exposed to that, as we go through the process of picking, what's the top 5 things that we can use this transformation to solve a real business problem for you? Usually there's an inherent understanding of how difficult that's going to be. But we do explain to them that some of the methodologies that we're going to put in place will have, in some cases, some very dynamic results. But we also say the larger problems we're going to keep working on, but you can expect these results pretty quick. You can expect these results within the next 6 months. We expect you to have these results by the end of the year. So really, when you look at the scope of a major business problem that's going to cause you to do transformation, they kind of get whether it's going to be something you can have a quick turnaround on. And I think that's really those big gorillas kind of, it's going to be a hard fight. Does that help answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Now, like I said, the train conductor is over here, and he says the train is coming. Yeah. One more. So
But I am going to be here all day. Remember, tip your waitresses. Okay.
So do you use assessment instruments to find out what your leadership is composed of?
Oh, what a great conversation question. We actually do. We have a 360-degree leadership assessment tool. And as a matter of fact, I just got through issuing one. So day one of Lean Leadership Academy, or day two, we have what we call the attributes of a lean leader. And you know, it's on a Rickard scale, so you know, 1 to, you know, and it's evidentiary, it's based on behavior. So I'll ask, does this lean leader demonstrate clear and concise communication when giving direction? And on a scale of 1 being, you know, strongly disagree to strongly agree. And so we have them do it from the perception of others. So we'll hand this to you. I'm not going to ask you whether you think you do. I want you to answer, do you think others think you do? And then they will go through that process, and we will actually, as they kind of prioritize it, we will actually help develop a development plan for them based on what they identified as their top 5 needs for improvement and their top 5 things that they think, you know, that they demonstrate that they do well. We say, okay, now that you've done that, keep in mind that a couple of weeks from now, we're going to ask all the people you lead the same question. They're going to fill out the same one that you did, and I, as an instructor, the senior leader, or Art are going to actually fill up. So we have a 3-phased, 360-degree feedback. The thing that's different, we don't point out all your warts. We say, okay, now that we understand this, we're going to create platforms inside of the transformation that's specifically going to work on those specific needs. So we come out with an A3 plan, what we call a PFEP, a plan for every person. And that plan for every person will take your top 5, your bottom 5, and we will find ways in the transformation to develop and leverage those skills. Very deliberate planning process. Great question. I can talk more about that, you know, if you're interested.
Say, since I can't compete with Sam, since he has the lavalier on there, you know, I need something to counterbalance that. Anyway, Sam, thank you so much. You're going to be around. Great talk.
Thank you, sir.
And definitely some practices there. So thank you, Sam.